welcome everybody back to SFGE 2021. I'm privileged to be here. Glad everybody could be here. And we got a lot to talk about. Now, in our past retro collecting panels, we have discussed hunting, collecting strategies, as well as refurbishment methods and preservation, which is something near and dear to my heart. How many of you have been at my panels in the past? We did one in 2019, show of hands, and then in 2018. Fantastic, welcome back. I want to thank all of you for being here today. We're going to go over some great stuff. Today, we are discussing not just generalized collecting, we're discussing changes in the market since 2020. There's been a lot of them, and how we can use that knowledge to our advantage as collectors moving forward. Because, I mean, 2020 rocked us in so many ways. You don't need me to tell you that. But it's also created a massive increase in demand for all games and all consoles across the board. You know, people stuck at home, wanted to play games. We looked up and all of a sudden a copy of Wii Sports was going for, 60, 70 bucks. And you're like, well, what has happened? Common stuff going for big bucks. Now, initially that sounds like a bad thing, right? Everything's gonna be more money. How are we gonna collect it? For those of you that have not watched my show, we don't pay for our stuff. We don't pay to collect. And again, we're going to talk about today how to use these changes in the market going forward to make sure we continue to rock on with collecting and gaming at no cost to us. So we're going to kind of take this by generation as far as what's happened to the game. This is different in each regard. And as far as the really retro stuff, we're seeing insane movement as far as the prices. Stuff even getting as crazy as people setting it out to be graded, stuff going for thousands and in some cases even millions of dollars. I'll also say that we won't talk as much about retro because we're finding a lot less of that because we're just on down the timeline a little bit. What you're finding the most of right now is Gen 6 stuff. And when I say that, I mean PlayStation 2, original Xbox games, Nintendo GameCube. We're kind of going to start there. I want to talk more about the things that you're more likely to find. You can buy the retro stuff anywhere you find it when you make the money using these tactics. And if you find it, great. We got to talk about PS2, again, and original Xbox games. A lot of them have doubled in value. And why that's important is all of these games in Gen 6, aside from the GameCube stuff, because Nintendo kind of does its own thing, they've been in their garbage phase. And everything goes through a garbage phase, right? Even NES went through a garbage phase between like 99 and 2001. Nobody wanted it, right? I mean, it was, at that point, it was old. It was old news. They were going for like 99 cents a game. You could get them at GameStop in a bargain bin, right? But we've hit that with the original Xbox and PS2 stuff. It's junk. It's not worth anything in most cases. But now we're seeing games out there that were not selling for anything, going for, and we're not talking big bucks, but we're talking anywhere from $15, $20, $25. So what that means to us is when we see that stuff, we've got to keep in mind, we have to be more aggressively checking our prices. Because when you see this stuff, and the guys go, oh, $5 a game, it's like, oh, I don't want to pay that, but you might need to pay that. Because the games in there you see that might have been worth $2 and $3 just a couple years ago, now they're fetching 15 and 20 bucks. So we got to make sure that we're aggressively checking everything now. And I mentioned the GameCube, how Nintendo always kind of does its own thing in the market, and it does. The GameCube, they've really enjoyed a partial immunity to the garbage phase. And you don't need me to tell you that a lot of the first party stuff, we're talking Mario, Zelda, Pokemon, is going for insane amounts of money. But even the stuff you wouldn't think would be worth anything, stuff, Cartoon Network games and just, Guitar Hero trash. You're looking on there and you're finding stuff going for 20 and 30 bucks, stuff that you would otherwise just leave sitting there. In fact, I've gone back and watched episodes of my own dadgum YouTube channel and found myself slipping on certain games because I was like, you wouldn't have got that. That's not worth anything. That's not worth investing in. Come to find out, it is. So with every one of these changes by Gen, we've got to talk about the actions that we take. Again, we have to more aggressively value potential game investments. And that goes for almost anything, except maybe sports. If you see sports cheese, you're probably safe. But again, there's stuff that was going for as low as $5 and $7, now bringing anywhere from $15 to $20 just because of the demand. And the supply hasn't changed so much, but we are talking about a finite resource out there and a lot more people buying these things. A secondary market that is a lot larger than it was because again, the demand is there and people would rather just shop at home in their undies, and I understand that. But I'm out there boots on the ground, right? And everybody else can be too. Who all in here is actively out, boots on the ground, collecting games in this day and age? Show of hands. And again, you know, for those of you that aren't doing it yet and maybe want to, there's going to be a lot of helpful information in this presentation for you going forward. Because again, it's a different climate out there right now. It's a different market, so it's changing everything. I swear, every week I'm learning something new about what I should be doing based on the changes that we're seeing. So yeah, seemingly overpriced games may be good deals in this inflated market. We're looking for price complacency with our vendors, right? And by that I mean we're looking at people like flea marketeers, guys that are there every week and selling their stuff. We're talking about pawn shops. We're talking about people with their standardized general pricing. $10 on PS2 games, $10 on Xbox games, $15 on GameCube games. They're not going through and pricing each thing, right? They kind of categorized it. So that sounds like too much, you know, at first glance to want to invest in any of that stuff, but you gotta cherry pick it, right? I'm finding myself going through things and finding those games that are now anywhere from $30 to $50, and again, we're not talking first party goodness necessarily. We're talking like cheese, and I don't know who's buying this stuff. That's the one answer I don't have for you. Who actually wants this stuff that's going for that much? But you're having to go through and really check it all and make sure you don't leave money on the table. Now you're thinking, but am I not collecting these things? The point behind all of this, and again, if you watch my show, you're familiar with what I do, is to put money back in to your bankroll. With the retro stuff getting more and more expensive every day, and I don't think it's stopping anytime soon, if you want to continue to collect that stuff, you can find a way to fund it with all the other stuff out there that you will commonly find. Eventually you want to pony up for the things that you want on eBay or wherever, and that's fine, I do it. But you want to make sure it's not breaking the bank. And when you're going to employ these tactics, when you're out hunting for stuff, you're going to add to your collection inevitably in the other generations, but you're also going to make sure you've got bankroll to make those big investments, and it's not going to break the bank. It's not going to touch the bank. And we've got to check pricing in secondhand shops, because a lot of those may be hidden gold mines. A lot of them have been. We're talking about your mom and pop places. We're talking about like the half-price books. Second and Charles, anybody familiar with Second and Charles stores you see in these places? You know, these people, they're just pricing willy-nilly. I've gone in there and seen 2 copies of Kid Icarus. One's $15, the one right next to it's $3, same game. They're just not looking at what they're doing. But they're also part of all this, right? They don't go back and change their prices on everything when stuff starts moving on eBay or when demands change. The price is the price. So we're looking to go into places like that as well and find things that they're just behind on. Recently I was in one, picked up a copy of Black Ops 2, Call of Duty for the Wii U, $6 complete. It's a $30 game right now. In these games with these online communities that are still rocking. So there's a perfect example of, hey, this might have been $6 at one point, but it's not now. So we're wanting to capitalize on those every chance that we get. And as far as the Saturn and the Dreamcast, you know, all those have remained, you know, uncommon and somewhat expensive. And you will find them time to time, it's just not very often. I mean, because people aren't getting rid of buckets of that stuff in droves. When you go to your flea markets, your yard sales, again, the PS2, original Xbox, GameCube if you're lucky, is what people are really trying to get rid of right now. And it's, you know, it's advantage us as far as getting that stuff and really capitalizing on it. But the values have increased to scale on things like Sega, you know, the Saturn and Dreamcast games. So if you do find them, but people don't know what they have, great. But here lately when I'm finding them, you know, everybody can check eBay, including, you know, people at their yard sales, and unfortunately, the cat's out of the bag on a lot of this stuff. You know, I think 10, 15 years ago when I was finding buckets and buckets of Nintendo stuff at people's houses, I'm not saying it can't happen, but it's not happening as much anymore because, again, the cat's out of the bag. People know, and they want what they have coming to them on some of that stuff. And again, it's okay to pay up for it, but with some of the things that we're discussing today, you're going to find ways to do it, and again, not break the bank. And moving into Gen 7 stuff, we're talking Xbox 360, PlayStation 3. Again, we've seen some really massive changes in those markets as well. Now, PS3 recently had the PSN store shutdown scare. Sony actually threatened to shut it down. I'm sure some of you heard about that. Well, they backed up on it, right? They admit they made a mistake. But the damage was done. What happened was, all of a sudden, physical prices on your PS3 stuff started increasing. And we're not talking everything. I mean, we're not talking Madden 2010 going up a big amount of money. But there were some games that were really going out of control, and a lot of them. I mean, more examples that I could even give. I mean, like, I've got a copy of Rambo, the game. I bought that for like 10 bucks on closeout at GameStop. It's like a $100 game now. Again, it's just demand. And then people got to where like, oh no, you know, I can't buy things digitally. We got to buy all this up. The trend that we're seeing with the changes in the market is that they're sticking. It's not like, oh, there's a spike and, okay, it's back to normal. The damage is being done and it's staying there. If it changes later, then it's on us to observe those changes, as we're the ones actively doing this. This is our hobby. But yeah, what I'm seeing is this stuff is sticking. And there's so many PS3 games that were $10 and $15, you know, valued on average, that are as much as $25 to $40 right now. I picked up a couple of Dragon Ball games not long ago, which, I mean, if you love Dragon Ball, great. I can't tell the difference from one to the other, but these games were like $10 games, $15 games not that long ago. 60 bucks a hit they're bringing right now. And again, I can't wrap my head around why it shot up that much. But that's why this is important. These are the things that you're gonna find, because they're not rare. They made tons of them. They sold well. These are popular franchises. But these are the kind of things you're going to find in shoe boxes and crates for $5 a piece. These are the things that you're going to find at places like Second and Charles, 10 and 15 bucks if they're in good condition. You really got to check that stuff. I almost left those Dragon Ball games. They're like $15 a piece, right? I don't know that. No meat on the bone. But it's 60 bucks valued with a lot of meat on the bone. And where does it go from there? So, again, lots of stuff changing. So they did not close the store down, but the market spike stuck. How long will it persist? I don't know, but right now the getting is really good on that. So many PS3 games, even commons, have doubled, allowing us to want to invest on them and still be able to get some money out of them. And again, the most important part about it, I don't want this to turn into a flipping seminar, but again, if you watch the show, I always keep some of what I find. It's not all, you know, put back into the bankroll. You're going to find that those games are like, oh man, that's such a great copy of that, right? Putting that on the shelf. You find your shelf-worthy stuff. But at the end of a year, at the end of the season, you look up and you got 2 IKEA shelves full of stuff that you didn't pay anything for, and you're still holding money. You know, it's not like you got to open a business to do this. It's just, again, it's a hobby. It's something you can do very casually. Now, there's a lot of guys out there that hustle full time, and that's great. Now, I don't have time for that, but you can do it casually and still really up your game, really get action going for yourself. Yeah, the Vita, too, I wanted to touch on that, was another console that was threatened in that potential store closed down. So any Vita stuff you find, you definitely got to be checking on. That stuff's always been kind of rare, but I don't want to leave that out. But the action to take knowing all this is pretty much the same as it was with the Gen 6 stuff. We've just really got to aggressively price the stuff that we find and figure out if the price being asked is worth it. Even if we already know that not long ago it was not a good price, it very well may be now. Now, the Xbox 360, it hasn't had anything to slow its aging and devaluation, unfortunately. Xbox has done very well with its backwards compatibility, you know, offerings and whatnot. So the 360 stuff, unfortunately, is entering its garbage phase on schedule. Now, that's not bad news for anybody wanting to invest and buy up that stuff just to play it, because God knows the 360 was a fantastic system. But as far as an investment standpoint, I'm seeing, you know, that kind of rollover where you got these sellers, oh, it's $5 a game, and they're all $6 games. And it's not that they price them, it's just that's what they feel they should sell for, and the money's not there. You know, there's games that were $10 and $15 games on 360 that now I'm looking and they're like $6 and $7. The market's just flooded. nobody wants them, can't get rid of them. I don't know why, there's just too much of it out there. So again, we've got to really holster our guns there at a certain point, make sure we're investing in what's doing well. I said everything as a whole has gone up, but there's still some areas in this where it has not. So 360, unfortunately, and that's not to say that there's not some 360 stuff that's still going to be good, but you really got to check. Now, the GameStops now have stopped carrying the Gen 7 stuff. That's another thing that's really contributed to this. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to find a GameStop that has those things. I want to clarify that. You need to check your GameStops locally, and especially when you're traveling, because these places, especially places that aren't really heavily traversed, you get into these GameStops and it's like time's forgotten, right? They've got games sitting there. And you might find some of this stuff. And I have lucked out in that regard and found stuff sitting there that, again, GameStop, they change their prices from the top, but they don't always get it done. So you're finding some of those $30 and $40 and $50 JRPG games on PS3 still sitting in a GameStop somewhere for 10 bucks, absolutely complete. You'll notice that none of it's being sold on the website anymore, and in most cases it won't even tell you if it's in store, but you still kind of want to check, because again, I have lucked out where that's concerned. So.
Is now the time to buy 360 stuff though, since it's on the wane?
You know, you could argue that it might be good to do if you can get, I certainly wouldn't leave any of it there. If you're talking like, oh, it's $1 game, yeah, I'll take them all, right? You know me, I don't leave it sitting there. But you do have those people, oh, $10 a game, and it's like, and you know, some of it seems like that may be okay, but some of your $20 games are down as low as like $7, and it's like, what happened? So again, Xbox just hasn't done anything to slow its aging process. Whereas PS3 has always had those exclusives that have got, but they were rare and have gotten rarer. Then paired with the store shutdown scare, we've just seen a real hype there. Whereas 360 just isn't bringing it right now. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't hurt to sit on stuff, and we will get into that later on in the presentation. That's something we got to talk about. But that requires foresight and, you know, looking ahead and really thinking about what the market's going to do. And right now, everything looks like at some point it's going to go up. The biggest problem you face there with those is when you're talking about games that are $5 and $6, it's like, great, sell them for $5 and $6, right? But no, in the last 2 years, the Postal Service has done repeated price hikes. You got to ship these things still, right? You know, we were shipping games for like $2.50. Now it's like $3.50. And when you get into that $7 and $8 range, you get cut into. Your bottom lines is really starting to hurt. And eBay has hiked their rates tremendously. I mean, it's got to be one of the worst platforms, and yet it is the premier platform to sell on. They're taking upwards of a 20% bite out of your butt on everything, and it's just gotten really rough. So you've got to weigh that too against the investments. Okay, so with I'm kind of following my notes here, make sure we go in order, because I don't want to leave any of this out. With GameStop phasing out Gen 7, it also means no more trade-ins for bloated credit. Now, in our past panels, we've talked about, you know, you end up with disc-only games, right? They're not complete. GameStop doesn't discriminate. They take anything for whatever the value says it is. And now we don't have that advantage. And they would do it with their stacked promotions. I mean, you would go in there with something that you were going to get $10 and walk out with 15 or 20. I didn't pay for any of my current gen consoles. None of them. It was all trades, yard sale trades, flea market trades, stuff that wasn't in good enough condition to move on eBay, but the GameStop would just take. So now we don't have that to factor in either. So now we definitely want to be buying all this stuff in primo condition if we can. We can't just be like, oh, well, GameStop will take it. Now they won't. There are still a few things that are worth a lot that they're taking because they know it's worth a lot, but it's few and far between. There's still a few valuables out there, and it's surprising these are valuable. Minecraft, I mean, common as a cold. Call of Duty Black Ops 2, but we're talking about games that still have really strong online communities. Therefore, there's still a demand for those games on those consoles for people that have them. So, still some of those to look for, but before I would trade them, I'd sell them. Because right now, those are like $25 games, and I can't even fathom why. Because they're not rare, but the demand is there, right? We're still talking about a finite resource. They're not printing more of these. So, we're definitely investing less in 360, but the upside is it is a buyer's market. And I don't want to leave out the Wii and the Wii U, but again, I've said this 3 times, I think, already. Nintendo just dances to their own beat, right? I mean, we have offbeat launch dates, and these systems end up almost being cross-gen because Wii was around for so long and did so well. And Wii U obviously didn't. But by the time we were on Xbox Ones and PS4s, Wii U was still just sitting there. The Switch wasn't even a twinkle in their eye yet. So it's kind of just fell in between. But again, that was how we knew that everything had gone so crazy. The Wii Sports, one of the most common games out there, it was a back-end game for God's sake. You could wallpaper a house with it. Was going for $50 and $60 because I guess people wanted to play bowling and boxing. I mean, I love Wii Sports, nothing against it. But for me, that's what really set off the whole thing in 2020. And people started taking note, and then everything just started going crazy. Literally, everything. So, again, I don't want to leave out Wii and Wii U, but the same rules apply there. If you check in your GameStops, look for those games. You may not find them, but if they're there, you know, there's a lot of people out there going for full Wii U collections. Those people are paying up big time. A lot of games that were $5 bargain bin games, if complete, you're looking at 25 to 30 bucks on eBay on average, some of those things. And Wii, even though it gets kind of factored in as a system that had way too much shovelware, because it did. It had a lot of great RPG offerings. It had a lot of great first-party stuff, obviously. Some more common than others, you know, depending on what got greatest hits and bestseller editions and whatnot. But again, these are the things that you hope you can find in these places that are still low-priced and got to be observant of what they're doing in the market right now. So something else I'm investing in here lately, and there's probably a lot of people that have beaten me to this because I don't do a lot of it, but now I'm starting to look back and realize that I should have been. Investing in collector's editions. Now you ever pre-order a game and you're like, oh, there's a collector's edition. Let's get the regular edition, right? Stop that. Get the collector's edition for God's sake. And you know, it's unbelievable. I'm looking back on some of these things that have tripled in value that you didn't even need. Some of them were just collections in some cases. But some of these things, just the pre-orders alone are selling on eBay for 3 times what they're going for before the pre-order windows even close. I don't really know what the secondary market is doing or thinking because I'm not part of what makes that up. And I'm not knocking anybody that is part of what makes that up. Obviously, that's who we're selling to. But it is a fact, and it's something that's going on, and it's something that you can be actively looking at before you buy in on some of these collector's editions. You can see these listings sold of someone with their order in hand. And again, I'm not telling you to go out there and buy 10 of something and scalp it. I'm not into that. But what I am into is if you can get 2 of them, yours is probably going to be free. You can go that route, and at the very least, you're getting something that's going to put more value into your collection over time. I'm looking back on some of these games that I've ordered and I'm just blown away by what they're bringing right now. And it's like, we're not waiting 4 or 5 years for that appreciation to come back in. It's happening like overnight. Some of these I haven't even had that long. I haven't had time to open some of them. And we're not just talking collector's edition from main publishers. In fact, I'm actually talking less about that, your AAA stuff. I'm talking about special releases from limited run games, if you're familiar with them, super rare games, and PlayAsia.com. Show of hands if any of you have ever ordered from any of these people. And that sounds like, oh man, it's going to be hard to get this stuff. And my experience is it just hasn't been. You know, you sign up for the email on the sites, they let you know before the pre-orders go live, and as long as you're there ready to get one, I just haven't had any problem doing it, but I wasn't getting any of that stuff, you know, full disclosure to make a buck off of it. But I'm looking back today and I'm like, what has happened to this stuff? But yeah, the pre-ordering is not as daunting as it sounds. You can sign up for the alerts and you'll know when this stuff goes live. And you gotta think, in some cases the collector's edition prices are as low as just maybe $20 more than the vanilla versions of some of these games that come out. And sometimes it's just the first edition of what gets pre-ordered, it's the first run, right? It just comes with something. The Story of Seasons game that came out recently for the Nintendo Switch, they come with little stuffed animals, right? Fun, great. It came with a little stuffed cow. There's usually a cow, a dog, something. But I bought 3 copies of that, one for my daughter, one for my wife, one for me. We'll play it together, great. We each got a cow, awesome. start a farm. I turn around and the cow is worth $100. $40 game, $100 cow. Who wants a cow for $100? I don't know. Again, some of these questions I can't answer for you. Somebody wanted a cow for $100. I didn't have time to play the game. I sold it for $100. You can have it. So at that point, you've got the $100 in hand. You still want to play the game? Great. Go buy the physical copy without the cow. You can have the cow and the milk, or whatever the saying goes, right? So again, we're talking about some of those publishers like Marvelous and NIS America. Oftentimes you pre-order it, you get the day one, you get the big box, you get the soundtrack, all that great stuff that eventually later on, and not much later on, begins doubling and tripling its value. I've got this copy of Moero Crystal H right here. This was one from Play Asia. Dungeon crawler, right? JRPG, great, $80. I mean, the game's only $40 if you want to buy it digitally or physically. So why not just do that? I'll tell you why. $80, great. This is a $300 game right now. I haven't even opened it yet, and now I'm afraid to. But I don't have to be. I could sell this. I could pocket the money. I can still get the game digitally or physically. Pocket the difference. I mean, but you know, at the end of the day, we've added value into the collection, and that wasn't even what we meant to do.
Get it graded.
Or that, and we will get into that too. We've got the SNK 40th Anniversary Collection. This was an NIS America release. Again, $40 game, and I believe this was $50. $10 more for the big box with all the collector stuff, soundtrack, yada yada, partridge in a pear tree, it's all in there. But it's going for $120 right now. And again, this is a collection. I've got most of these games physically already just from collecting, but it shot up big time. We got Rune Factory 4 Special Edition for the Switch. I already finished this game on 3DS, but I just wanted to get the book and the extra stuff with it, but I don't need it. And this is going for upwards of $100 right now. So again, $60 game, you can sell it, pocket the difference, get the game back, whatever you want to do. We talked about the Story of Seasons cow. Who is buying $100 cows? Again, I can't tell you. I can only tell you that they're doing it. And you can see that they're doing it. It didn't cost any extra to get that edition. You pre-ordered it, they sent you a cow. Thanks for the cow. Shakedown Hawaii. This got credit for being the last Wii U game that was published. It's kind of a top-down Grand Theft Auto kind of thing from V-Blank Entertainment. But yeah, $29.99. Great. I'll take one because I collect Wii U. I didn't want to not get it. $80 right now. How bad do I want it? Again, it's on the eShop. If you want to play it, you can download it. You look back and this stuff ends up being worth so much money. So get those collector's editions when they're available. Don't talk yourself out of them, rather talk yourself into them. And that's almost everything. You kind of want to look first, but again, I'm seeing pre-orders for sale before the pre-order windows even close. And they're being sold. I'm seeing sold listings, so the proof in the pudding is right there for you to see. So again, what this does, just circling back, at the very least, it adds value to your collection if you keep it, which I'm probably going to keep all this. I'm not telling you to go out and start flipping collector's editions. I'm just telling you they're worth picking up because of how crazy they're going respectively in the market right now. It always allows you the option to at least sell the collector's edition, buy the regular edition or digital, and pocket the difference for a net free copy of the vanilla game. You have your cake, you eat it too. Fantastic. Because at the end of the day, you need all these books and CDs. Probably not. Are you driving down the road bumping the Rune Factory soundtrack? Maybe you are, I don't know. I haven't yet, I'll let you know if I do. We'll make a video about it. But, you know, flip it if you want to fund your vintage buys. And we talked about the retro stuff is starting to thin out. People are starting to covet it. People are paying more for it. And eventually there's that game that you just want to get, that you are going to have to pay up for. And that's when this comes into play. It's like, well, I've got assets, right? We're not going to go break the bank. We've got ways to do it because we've prepped ahead of time. We've ponied up for some collector's editions. Again, we're not seeing as much appreciation for like the $200 and $300 AAA stuff like Call of Duty and the big helmet that came with the last Doom release. It didn't end up going for much, but I wanted to keep it in case I want to run around the house with a Doom helmet on. It happens. But most of your stuff under $100, the $79 to $99 range of collector's editions, doubling and tripling. But we are able to invest more in those consoles than previously. And if there are consoles that you still need, by all means, you want to get them, but it's getting hard to get anything out there. I've had people call me saying, how come I can't buy an Xbox One right now? It's because there aren't any. They're not making, and they're not on the shelf. They just cleaned them out. So we're going to talk about the most common things that you're going to find first, right? Again, the Wiis, I got to where I couldn't give you $10 for a Wii. All the parts half the time and stuff are missing, and there's really any money in it. By the time you ship something, you're taking all that out of the $40 that it's worth, you're not left with anything. But Wiis have gone up to as high as $80 right now. You gotta think about how well the Wii sold, how many of those consoles are actually out there. Now you're still gonna find them everywhere, okay? We're saying consoles are drying up, but these are the ones you're gonna find most common. I mean, I've bought like 3 or 4 Wiis in a single weekend. Because you still find them for $20. People are like, I don't want this, I don't play it anymore. A big money out there, and then if it comes with games, keep some of them for yourself. This is what we do. You gotta get these console bundles off of people, buying Wiis as low as $20, but now you can actually be upwards of 35 to 40 and maybe still come out smelling like a rose. Whereas before, I got to where I just couldn't buy them anymore because there was no value. PlayStation 2. You're finding tons of PlayStation 2s. And even better if you're finding them in collector's colors, silvers, blues, whatever you find. But on average, PS2s were bringing about $50, $60, right? They weren't bringing a whole lot. So I would want to be in around $15, $20 in them if I found them, because God forbid if they don't work. Now, they're bringing about $110 to $120 for a PS2. And I'm asking, who is paying this? But apparently the demand is back. These games, because of this demand, because of this big spike, they're pulling out of a garbage phase early. Some games never do. Atari never fully pulled out of it. But it's created this demand. The original Xbox, which I avoid those things like the plague, they weigh a metric ton, and to ship them is just a monster. But they're selling for around $100 right now. And this is where it gets crazy. So is the 360. Now, who wants an original Xbox over a 360? There's really not much point in doing that, but it has actually been easier to get rid of OG Xboxes than it has been 360s. And I think that's because there's a lot of customization options you can do with the original 360. They can be modded. You can make, retro pies out of them, if you will, putting different software on them and whatnot. So there's still a demand in that regard. But I wasn't buying those at all for the longest time because, if you're only going to sell it for $40, $50, it'll cost at least $30 to $40 to ship it. If you drop one on your foot, you're going to the hospital. But those are the ones that you're going to find most of the time out there. Now, as far as the Nintendo consoles, your NESs, your Super Nintendos, your 64s, they've kind of plateaued. I'm still seeing them around $100 to $110 of value. And what gets rough is you've got people that, they want the most for those if they have them. Again, the cat's out of the bag. And they're not rare. Everyone was pretty rare. It was pretty rare. No, everybody had them. They're out there. They're still out there. It may be rare to see one for sale. Again, these are becoming more coveted. They're being more hunted. They're being kept more in more cases. But the value hasn't really shot up that much on those. That's kind of stayed about the same. But we talked about Nintendo's always danced to its own beat. They're just funny that way. And we'll talk about Dreamcast too. Dreamcast, strangely enough, the games have always commanded a good bit of money, but the consoles we're only ever getting about $60 for a Dreamcast. But now they're going for around $100 too, so that's definitely shot up. You don't find many Dreamcasts though, and a lot of times you really don't want to overpay on those. They've got a pretty high fatality rate. I've bought so many broken Dreamcasts, broken dreams. And the Wii U, you just don't see many of those. And God almighty, if you don't have a Wii U and you do get one, you really got to think about holding on to it. Can I see a show of hands by Wii U owners in here? So I don't have to tell you what a great and underrated system that was. There's still so many things it does, in my opinion, even better than the Switch. So if you find a Wii U, depending on what we're talking investment-wise, you almost want to make sure you can keep one and kind of future-proof yourself in that regard, so you don't miss out on some of the things that it exclusively did. But for a while there, Wii U was going for about $89, $90 because GameStop was selling it for that. So great. Now you're talking $150 to as high as $200. And again, where she stops, nobody knows. I think that will continue to go up because we know that Wii U, I don't want to call it rare, but it just didn't sell well. So when something doesn't sell well, the odds are a lot smaller that you're going to find 3 or 4 of them in somebody's garage later on. And then the PS4s and Xbox Ones, this is where it gets really wild, used with stains on them, are bringing as high as they were, brand new a few years ago, because you can't get them and you want those, right? I mean, great, there's PS5s, great, there's Series X, but is there? Because I mean, people are still scalping those like mad. Nobody can get them. I still don't have either one of the new consoles, and I'm okay with that because I still have so much unfinished business on those consoles. So yeah, PS4s and Xbox Ones, I mean, I probably still want to be around $100 to $150 on those if I buy in, but you're lucky if you find them at all, and they're bringing upwards of $250 to as high as $300 depending on what they're coming with. So consoles are nuts, but it's made it to where we can invest more in those than we were. Kind of do a time check here, want to make sure we get to everything. Before we wrap things up, I think it's important to talk about the bubble. Everybody's always talking about the bubble. Oh, it's going to burst pretty soon. Oh, eventually the bubble's going to burst. I want to tell you that that's not what I'm forecasting. I don't think the bubble is ever going to burst, to be honest with you. I just don't think it is, because we were saying that before it got to the point it is right now, the reasons we're having the talk that we are today, and it's still going, it's still growing. We're talking about an ever-growing interest in a finite resource, again, because they're not printing any more of this stuff. So if it sold millions, if it sold hundreds of thousands, whatever it did, fine, but people are buying it up, and they're keeping it, a lot of this stuff. So again, we're gonna see the prices rise up. If we're talking about people grading stuff, we're taking stuff out of circulation. So that's crazy, we're in that age. We're in the age of grading and investing among just collecting. And those are also, contributors into those factors. There's been a lot of factors that have driven games down over the years, like counterfeiting, and there's still some of that going on eBay because they don't police that stuff very well. But even those games that have kind of taken a hit because of those things have skyrocketed back up to numbers that I just can't even believe. People ask me a lot too, you're raising the prices on games. You're buying games and you're selling them. You're harming the retro community. That's actually false too. We're the ones driving down the prices. Because when you're adding something back in, when you're putting something back out into the market, you're adding to the number available. And you're undercutting the market. And the more people that do that, we're bringing the prices down. I guarantee you, I'm not the only one that figured out that their copy of this is worth $300 the other day. Now, I didn't list it, but I bet a lot of people did. And then the next guy does it for $270, and then, I want mine to sell. He does it for $250. Next thing you know, it's back down to $200. Luckily, when you're talking about things that are somewhat rare like this, you're not going to see as much of that. But just a few years back, Contra on the NES was a $60 game. And it's back down around $20 now because everybody that realized it was worth it, I got Contra. Who doesn't have Contra? It came to your house with samples of cereal and laundry detergent. Everybody had Contra. So, yeah, I call it the Contra theory. We actually bring down the price. And the best part, and we've talked about this in the past panels, of what we do is the preservation of all this stuff. Because I'm going to tell you, most of the consoles and games that I find, they're in trouble, right? We got a gnat bothering me here. They need help. The discs need resurfacing, the systems need to be cleaned, they ain't been tested in God knows how long, there's batteries exploded in the controllers. You go through all that stuff, you fix this stuff, and we put it back out there, and then we're a link in that chain. We're making sure that these things are gonna be around for years to come, and that's a very important role that we play when we do all this stuff. You don't keep everything you find necessarily. Obviously, we're talking about selling some of this stuff, putting money back in your bankroll to cover the things that you do want. But all the while we're doing that, we're saving these things. We're rescuing the past. You're talking to a guy that found a 32X in a box under a man's lawnmower in his garage. It does happen, not every weekend. But thank God I found it. I asked the guy, hey, you got any games? No. And I see it. I see the yellow. I see the box. You get a 32X under your lawnmower, dude. So, I mean, it happens. And God knows where that 32X would be today if it remained under that lawnmower. And how does it get under the lawnmower? But it was under the lawnmower. Now it's on my shelf. It's safe. But yeah, I wanted to make this year's panel about the changes in the market. Because again, there's so much that's different now than it was before. And I think we're going to continue to see these trends growing to where we really have to aggressively check every game. And not every game has reached its peak of what it's going to be worth or has really increased in value, whereas it may soon. So again, we've got to be aggressively checking the stuff that we're not sure about. We can't do what I call no looks, where you're like, oh, I know that's worth that, so I will or won't buy it. We got to check. Again, looking back at the Dragon Ball games I was talking about. $60 a piece for those. Who knew? Not everyone is, but some of them are bringing that, and it's just absolutely unbelievable. So, yeah. Before we wrap up, I want to take a moment for some Q&A for all of you out there. Questions for me? Yes, sir.
What's the most valuable game you own, and how much is it?
The most valuable game that I own right now, it may be this thing going for $300. I don't know. 300 seems to be the cap out, but I do have a Konami Metal Warriors for the Super Nintendo. I would rather cite something retro than new because values could change on these. And loose, it's going for around $240, I want to say right now. And I could never sell it because I've had it since I was a kid. Great game. If you've never played Metal Warriors, emulate it, do whatever you have to do. It's one of the all-time greats that you just don't hear people talk about. But yeah, I would have to rate Metal Warriors as probably my most valuable cartridge sitting there, and definitely a crown jewel.
Thank you.
But
Are people buying to collect or to play?
yes. You've got people that I swear are not playing these things because I see these pictures of their game rooms and they're just, oh, they're immaculate, everything's being lined up. And there's no space on their shelf. Where do you put stuff when you get new stuff? You just redo the whole thing. It's like these people are probably not, and that's fine, do your thing. But I know there are some people that really aren't sitting there playing hours and hours of their games. They're just collecting. And I think a lot of the people that are grading games obviously aren't concerned with ever playing those again. But I would hope people are collecting to play because, I know I get a lot less time to play nowadays than I used to doing the YouTube thing and, creating content and just really getting involved with games in that regard. But still, at the end of the day, that's what I'm living for. This is the feels and going back to some of this stuff, as well as the modern gaming too. There's so much stuff coming out that I'm excited to get into, and again, buy your collector's editions of it. But yes, sir.
How do you think emulation is affecting the sale and resale market?
You would think that it really is, because it's so easy to do, and it's not a new thing. We've had that option for so long to do, but there's so much to be said for actually having the actual hardware and software, and that's what people want to do. And I gotta tell you, I don't have anything against emulation, but there are instances where I have played certain NES games like Castlevania, Punch-Out. The timing's not right. It's not right on the Wii. It's not right on the NES Mini. I'm not as good at it. Something is off. And I know there's a lot of doohickeys and gadgets out there now to try to get rid of that. But yeah, long story short, I don't think it's affected it at all. The price is still going up, and we're only seeing more ways to emulate. There's more stuff coming out every day. Yes, sir?
How many games do you have?
I wish I could tell you. It's got to be somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000. Yeah, you think I would keep better inventory too, because there's so many great ways to do that now. There's so many apps just on your phone that will not only take inventory of what you have, but also value it. And while it's kind of, fluffed value in the sense of what you could really get for it. It is a great tool to know how much everything is worth that you have. And some of this stuff, when it gets that big, you want to insure it. God forbid your house burned down or something like that. But yeah, it's somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000. Again, I need to get a better handle on that. I need to hire an inventory guy.
So when you find, like, especially a game cartridge at like a flea market or a garage sale and the seller has no idea if it even will play, like, when is it worth to buy it? Like, is it worth learning how to refurbish?
Yeah, because in most cases, the cartridges, there's nothing to it. Some alcohol and a Q-tip. It's just not real intensive stuff. You still want to look and make sure there's no actual corrosion. You know, I've seen some pretty rough cartridges out there, but then we use that as leverage too, right? Because again, if you watch the show, I beat people up senselessly on the condition. So it's like, hey man, come on. You don't even know if this is going to play. And they don't, right? They don't know. And we assume the risk. So oftentimes, you're going to get cartridges as cheap as, you know, between $1 and $5 a piece. And if that's all they need, and 9 times out of 10 it is, yeah, you come out smelling like a rose on that. And you still see like your sports games and stuff not bringing a ton. But, you know, in general, if you're collecting the stuff, you want all of it, right? So, you know, you choose your battles, but yeah. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the Vita. What about PSP, 3DS? What are your thoughts there?
You know, I shouldn't have left those out, but the PSP seems to have stayed right where it was, again, because Sony has all those great exclusive JRPGs. That didn't stop with the PSP, obviously. It's probably got more on there than anywhere. I have seen some just incredible PSP lots in the past that I've picked up that have ended up being worth hundreds. So that's another one that you definitely want to check your values on, but if they're selling them for just a couple bucks a piece, you're probably not going to miss there. That probably can be a no-look. The PSP stuff is still, you're seeing a lot less of it for sale out there. So there's your supply and demand factor. As far as 3DS, I want to predict that that's going to make a humongous resurgence. In fact, it's already starting, okay? I've got the Metroid 3DS, the special one, and I couldn't resist buying it, right? But I looked the other day, just I was curious. It's going for about 700 biggins. Now it's not for sale, dadgummit, but I mean, this is like a $200 machine. So, I mean, yeah, there's a little collectability there. I know that's a factor, but I really think that the 3DS stuff is going to start climbing at least somewhat of the same way that the Wii U is, only because you're going to see less of it. They're not printing any more of it. You can't go to Target and buy a 3DS right now in most cases, so. Yeah, I mean, it's not old enough to think you want to put more than retail in any of it, but you definitely got to check what you're looking at. And again, you're talking about a console with a ton of exclusive RPGs. Yes, sir.
Just in the coming years, Black Label Silent Hill games, especially Silent Hill 2, 3, and 4, where do you see those going? Because they're all pretty much like in the triple-digit range if they're complete Black Label.
I think the sky's the limit because they weren't there. Just that long ago, they weren't there. I remember selling a Silent Hill 2 for around 60, 70 bucks, and that was great. But like you say, it's out of control. And the more we know that it's out of control, you know, again, I say we drive the prices down, but then you're talking about something that's exceedingly rare. You definitely don't see much of this stuff. And the people that do have them, they're not getting rid of them. So it's hard to say where the ceiling is the thing. I don't think the bubble's gonna burst, but I do think that you could still see the prices go even higher than that if the demand is really that big, and obviously it is proven to got where it is right now. Yes, sir.
I saw on CNN the other day about, you know, this made world news CNN about, you know, collections like Mario that had that sealed copy that went for all that money, the original Zelda that went for all that money just the past couple of months. Do you think that there's actually non-gamers, just speculative investors that are helping bring up the price? Because some of the prices that I've been paying attention to is not this newer stuff, but it's like more older stuff that I pay attention to. And the prices this past like 2 years has just gone through the absolute roof. And I just feel, I'm wondering if you think it's investors, like people that aren't gamers, that are actually bringing up that price.
I mean, in the case of the graded stuff, definitely. I mean, there's even websites now, there's, you know, places where you can actually buy shares of a game. Just as crazy as the sports card market is going right now too, same thing. You're buying shares of a sealed Zelda, of a sealed Mario. So that's definitely bringing it up. But yeah, I don't think that the actual gamers have much to do with that. I've run a couple social media polls and stuff on my channel too, just to see what people's feelings on that are. I think generally the feelings are still against ever grading something and sealing it up forever, never to be used again. A lot of people don't care for leaving the game sealed, right? Open it up, play with it. But because, like you, just like what you started with, right? It's in the media. That's all it takes. So once we start getting people's attention, that's definitely going to continue, and that is going to contribute to it, especially if there are sealed, non-graded things on the market. A lot of these big-time collectors and flippers and guys are buying up sealed stock of even stuff as new as like Wii U stuff and just putting it aside to be graded because they're doubling their values on average after they do. So yeah, inevitably, I think that's going to have to bring the market up.
We've talked a lot about console games, but do you know the market for old PC games works similarly?
That's a good one to bring up. You know, I am buying into PC stuff a lot more than I used to, which was never, because you gotta be really careful what you buy. There's a lot of PC stuff that you gotta have the codes for it, the key code, and you look and you think it's complete and it's not, or it's a one-time use. But some of the stuff that you can kind of do your research. It's harder to do on the fly, but I'm seeing some things like older Diablo games and stuff like that are, you know, I'm not gonna leave that sitting there for $1, because on average, anything that looks cool usually is. I mean, you can usually get upwards of 25, 30 bucks for cool looking RPGs. I've even kept a few of them just in case I could ever get one of them working if it looks like something I wanna experience.
I have a Diablo 1 disc.
Yeah, now I think Diablo 1 discs are bringing some big cheddar right now. I know the PS1 copy is, and you've got that floating around. So yeah, I still don't buy as much of it, but if I do see it, I'm more likely to look through it now, because if it's stuff that's, I don't know, in between maybe 2004, 2008, some of that stuff, it may still be worth investing in if there's, you know, a way to play it. Oh, big jump.
So speaking as an old guy, up to 5 years ago, I could go to mom and pop, flea market, wherever, and find Gen 1 stuff. I could find Atari, ColecoVision, television. And now when I walk into shops, what are you looking for? Anything that's 40 years old, we don't have anything. Like they've ditched everything. And do you think any of that stuff is gonna come back? Is it just there's no demand for it? I mean, you can't find it in stores, anybody even has it.
I think there's less demand for it because everybody into it now, it's all the Super Nintendo kids, right? The bulk of the retro community is people that came up in the 90s. There's a lot less people that are concerned with the 2600. I mean, you know I love that stuff, but it hit a garbage phase and stopped. I cleaned out a mom and pop shop in Buford not too many years back. They had a bunch of 2600 carts for $1 a piece. Get them out of here. I think he ended up selling me someone for like as low as 50 cents. Just didn't want them, but you know, I was plugging holes in the collection, right? But it's a demand thing. I don't think, you know, you walk in and ask for it, but I just don't think they're getting hit up for that stuff very much. And on average, when I buy Atari games in a lot, usually about $1 a piece. When I find them at the flea market, usually a big box, $1 a piece, because I think they've had them a while and can't get rid of them. And I don't think that's going to change, because I mean, again, that stuff really technically wasn't rare either. They sold tons of them. You know how many copies of Pac-Man and Combat floating around out there? It's just one of those things. There's just not a demand. Ergo, there's no value. Well, we got about 5 minutes left, but I would like to say thank you to all of you for coming and spending this time with me today. I hope that you found something in what we discussed today that's going to help you out there in your hunting and collecting in the months and years to come. Again, we're talking years, we got to know what changes are down the road, but I think right now the getting's definitely good on everything that we talked about today. Show of hands, how many of you found something interesting or something you think will be helpful to you in your hunts in this panel today? And I'm seeing hands across the board. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't put your hand up, but I appreciate you very much for doing so. I want to thank everybody again for coming out. This was just a fantastic talk. I've got cards up here for my YouTube channel, Twitter links, Twitch, all that fun stuff. If you want to stop by and take a card on your way out, I would love to have y'all check us out on the tube, watch the Emceemur show, leave a comment. I'd love to keep in touch with all of you guys and find out what you're finding out there in the field, because the hunts are always changing, but the hunts are always out there. Feel free to take a look at some of my artifacts too on the way out. But again, thank all of you for being here, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of the expo.
Yeah.